You know, there's this word we hear all the time, especially around November, veteran. But what does that word actually mean? Turns out that simple question kicks off a huge and often pretty heated debate. Who really gets to claim that title, and maybe more importantly, who gets to decide? Today, we're going to unpack that tension, using some solid research to cut right through the noise. So, let's start there. What truly makes someone a veteran? Seems like a simple question, doesn't it? Well, that's where things start to get complicated, because there isn't just one answer, there are two, and they are often pushing against each other.
Okay, so on one side, you've got the legal definition. It's totally black and white. According to the U.S. government, if you served in the active military and got an honorable discharge, you're a veteran. End of story. But then you have this whole other thing, the social definition. And this one is an unwritten, informal, but really powerful set of rules that creates a kind of hierarchy, often putting combat experience at the very top.
And this isn't just some abstract argument, you know? Every single year around Veterans Day, this whole debate just blows up. You see it in messages from companies, on social media, even in conversations at the dinner table. And it causes real confusion, hurt feelings, and a genuine divide among the very people it's supposed to honor.
So, okay, how do we get past all the arguing and find some actual clarity? Well, that's where the data comes in. We're going to dive into a groundbreaking study that did exactly that. It went out and measured how different groups actually define the word veteran and looked at the real-world impact of those definitions.
And get this, the person who led this research has an incredibly powerful and unique perspective. This work was done by Dr. Rony A. Rodas. Now, not only does he have a Ph.D., which gives him the serious academic skills for this kind of deep analysis, but he's also a combat veteran of the Iraq War. So he's not just studying this from a distance, he has lived this very question from both sides, as a researcher and as a member of the community.
And believe me, this was not just some quick online poll. This was a seriously robust study. We're talking surveys with 2,000 people, dozens of deep one-on-one interviews, analyses of news and social media chatter. They even ran experiments to see what kind of language could actually help bridge the gap. They really looked at this problem from every possible angle.
All right, before we dive into what they found, there's one key idea we got to get our heads around. It's called social identity theory. Basically, it's the idea that a huge part of who we are, our sense of self, our pride, comes from the groups we belong to. And that's why the question of who's in the group and who's out can get so emotional and so personal. Okay, so that brings us to the core of the study, the big question, right? Who is actually drawing these social lines? And just how strict are they? Who, in the court of public opinion, gets to decide who qualifies as a real veteran?
So one of the most eye-opening things they found came from measuring something they call boundary strictness. It's basically a fancy way of asking, how tough are the rules for who gets to be called a veteran? And it turns out the people within the veteran community, especially those with combat experience, have the tightest, most narrow definitions. They are the ones most likely to guard the gates of that identity.
And this kind of behavior, it actually has a name: peer policing. It's what happens when members of a group start enforcing their own informal rules on each other, creating these internal hierarchies. It's the engine that drives that feeling that some types of service are somehow more real or more worthy than others.
So what's driving all this? The research points to this thing called zero-sum beliefs. It's this totally false idea that respect and recognition are like a pizza. You know, the mistaken idea that if you give a slice to a non-deployed veteran, there's somehow less pizza left for a combat veteran. It's a key source of the friction here.
Okay, so why should we care about any of this? I mean, they're just words, right? Well, no, not at all. These labels, these social hierarchies, they have a deep and very real impact on people's lives.
I think the researchers really hit the nail on the head when they explain the damage this causes. This gatekeeping, it puts a stigma on veterans who didn't deploy, making them feel like their service doesn't count. But here's the other side of it. It also takes the incredibly varied experiences of all combat veterans and squishes them into one single stereotype. In the end, it hurts everyone. Nobody wins.
And this feeling of being devalued or misrecognized by your own community, the study links it to something incredibly serious: moral injury. This is a very specific type of psychological harm that happens when you feel that your sacrifice and your service have been betrayed or invalidated. It causes real, tangible pain. Look, the bottom line is, this isn't just about hurt feelings. The stakes here are huge. This debate is about a veteran's sense of legitimacy. It's about respect, and yeah, it absolutely bleeds over into who society thinks is truly deserving of the benefits and support they earned. But here's the good news. The study doesn't just leave us with the problem, it actually gives us a roadmap forward. It lays out a clear, evidence-based path to do a better job of how we talk about and recognize everyone who has served.
It really boils down to 3 key areas. First up, communications. We need to use messages that celebrate all veterans while also finding a way to distinctly and respectfully acknowledge the unique experiences of combat service. Next, policy. Things like government forms and websites should use the clear, legal, and inclusive definition of veteran, period. And finally, practice. The veteran community can lead the way by encouraging conversations that validate every kind of service, moving away from that gatekeeping mentality.
And really, the goal of all this is so simple but so important. This isn't about taking recognition away from combat veterans. Not at all. It's about lifting everyone up and improving recognition across the board, making sure no one's service gets erased.
And that leaves all of us with a really important question to think about. This isn't just for veterans to solve. It's for all of us, civilians, employers, friends, family. How can we, in our own words and actions, honor every single person who raised their hand and swore that oath, without accidentally falling into that trap of creating a hierarchy of service?